We introduced the protocol in 2018 called MVL, Mass Vehicle Ledger. And then Singapore was one of the prime choice for us to open the service and introducing the blockchain protocol and ride-hailing together. After introduced the TADA ride-hailing Singapore in 2018, the next market country that we looked at was Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand. We picked Cambodia first. The vehicles that people are using for the taxi service and transportation was three-wheeler imported from India. One of the big reasons why we wanted to build an electric tuk-tuk and a vehicle is since the beginning, the design of all our blockchain ecosystem needs to have access of the vehicle movement data like location and the vehicle condition.
You have just heard from Wu, founder of MVL, TADA, and ONiON Mobility. Earlier in his founder journey, Mothership, a Singaporean online magazine, portrayed K as the Korean guy who made a ride-hailing app for the Singapore market after meeting a driver who called himself a dog. Let us hear how it came to that.
Welcome everybody. I'm very excited to be here with Kay today, whom I saw presenting at the Korean-Japanese insurance startup ecosystem summit a few weeks ago. His company is invested by IVS, who are organizing Kyoto event next week, the big conference. And so we'll do this as an unofficial side event to the road to Kyoto. Welcome. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
When I was doing some background research and this one article popped up, and that was from 2019. That was the early days in your journey. It really nicely covered the origin story. So maybe we start at the beginning. How did you end up in Singapore?
Actually, I was living in New York and we decided to move back to Asia. So 14, 15, we actually landed at Hong Kong and then started building a cross-border car reservation service. That was the beginning for us to engage into mobility industry. But back then, Uber and Grab, all those big players couldn't make any profit. So all investors are very skeptical. We were like, okay, what should we do? And then we're looking into other opportunity or something that nobody ever done before. Luckily, we found the blockchain as a new business model and new tool. So we implemented that and then introduced the protocol in 2018 called MVL, Mass Vehicle Ledger. And then Singapore was one of the prime choice for us to open the service and introducing the blockchain protocol and ride-hailing together. It's because back then Singapore was very much supporting on the blockchain side, but also at the same time, monopoly of ride-hailing and also creating the problem between the drivers. So that's why we opened the service in Singapore.
Even in 2018, there was already Grab there and Uber was there.
Interestingly, the problem actually was arising because of Uber and Grab's the merger and acquisition together. So they merged the business in Southeast Asia in 2018. So 2017, they were discussing about the merging their business. Let's say Uber giving up all their Southeast Asia operation to Grab. In return, Grab gives that their equity of around 27% something. Actually, Grab became the superpower application on ride-hailing, except Indonesia, but in all Southeast Asia, they became the monopoly.
You really were the real first competition that they had then after the merger. A fearless attitude to say we're going to challenge Grab in that market. How did you link the two? Why did you make the choice to actually use it on the blockchain?
First of all, let's say Grab and Uber, these players actually had a huge amount of money from the investors, like billions of dollars. And they've been spending quite a lot of money for their driver incentives and user coupon. But those kind of incentives and coupons actually being cut after the merger happened. So then became the one monopoly player, one strong player, and they don't have any reason to give an incentive to the people and the drivers, right? You don't give food to your captive customer. So because of that, then the problem was actually arising. And then one of the startup and small startup to crack those kind of problems and addressing the issue, you got to have something new, which is a business model that nobody ever done before. But the point is, if we go with a traditional commission-based ride-hailing model, there's no way that we can actually compete against them because they have a lot of money on their pocket and they still can get coupons and they can squeeze us in a very simple manner. But if we can bring a completely new concept with, let's say, 0% commission and supported by the blockchain token economy, we can actually attract more drivers into our platform and then provide a cheaper fare to our customers. But at the same time, our whole ecosystem can grow bigger. So that was our initial design. But 0% commission itself is actually a super powerful message, and also the business model stemmed from the blockchain philosophy. Those Grab and Uber, I don't think they can copy this model. Because of this, like Web3 based ride hailing itself gave us the opportunity to break through to take good enough number of market shares in Singapore.
Yeah, the capital, the investments that Grab and Uber got went for marketing on the one side and then for the discounts on the other side. You're clearly winning the game on the discount side simply because your prices are much lower. But the marketing is then also ground level, isn't it? How did that develop from day one? Nobody knows that you're there on day one.
That's right. So day one was actually a lot of struggling. But first thing that we focused was actually acquiring the driver. So we got winning the heart of the driver, and then that became the very strong supply of the whole ecosystem and ride-hailing services. The next homework is actually we bring the demand, how to attract the users into this platform, because once you actually locked into one of the service, like say Uber or Grab, and you connect your credit card, and then it's really hard to come out unless you have a very good reason to come out. To bring those kind of demand to our drivers, because 0% commission itself is actually strong enough to secure the drivers, but the demand generation is actually one of the big homework for us. For first few years, actually, we are focusing more on the driver side, because from the beginning, fundamentally, we designed our system to record the data of the vehicle and also the driver's behavior. That was the first initial design. The demand generation is actually a very big struggle for us. But suddenly, the lucky moment came to us. Pandemic happened and the lockdown also happened. Slowly but surely, it was opening for the people to move around. But because of those pandemic time, the overall market situation went really bad. Nobody's moving around. The demand became close to zero. Then drivers couldn't get enough orders. Naturally, drivers also looking into the other opportunities and other alternative platforms who can give an income on orders to them. Then TADA became one of the prominent choice for them because it's 0% commission. But meanwhile, if they cannot meet the quota of certain level of orders, they couldn't get the incentives. If they don't get incentive from the big platforms like Uber and Grab, their commission cost is quite high, over 30%. At the same time, users, because of those lack of liquidity and at their income level being shrinked, they are also looking into the cheaper fare. Those two expectations has been matched together very well. Then we went through the very good retention of the service during the pandemic time. That was actually the very good beginning of we're drawing the hockey stick growth.
I was pretty much inside during the pandemic, so how can that be good for mobility business? But yeah, good explanation. So that worked.
Because of the pandemic, all those big players actually pulled back into the starting line again together with us. If you actually compare two different models, with the commission-based model and the 0% commission with the blockchain model, and if they start from day one, it's obvious the 0% commission model is much more beneficial for the drivers and users.
Clearly, you still need to make money. Your revenue sources, and as you said, you're recording the data from the drivers and you're monetizing the data. Of course, we've seen many business models in that space of data marketplaces and also in Japan, like data banks that working with permission data and can resell it. How is it different with the data that you're collecting? Why is it valuable for the people who buy it, and who buys it?
It's not only about selling the data and then making the money. Actually, from the beginning, the design of this whole ecosystem, our beginning working capital we raised from the ICO. So that helped us to build the TADA ride hailing and then whole ecosystem team. But next one came from the real world business, not just the data selling. Uber started charging so-called platform fee and software fee, which is about 3 to 5% on top of the 30% of commission because of their profitability issue. And then they're claiming that this is the software usage fee that they're charging. Ever since then, around 2018-19, and Grab and Gojek, those big players have started following that trend. That became a new normal for whole ride-hailing industry. Even though we don't charge any commission, as of now, we are also following that trend of fixed fee of 60 cents per trip. That platform software usage fee became a very good income for us. As of now, we've grown quite a big chunk of market share that we've acquired from the Singapore market. With that platform fee income, our entire company is actually profitable as of now. But at the same time, certain portion of revenue that we purchase our MVL token from the market and redistribute to our drivers as an incentive, all these mechanisms start working up perfectly. We start having this real world business income.
I was looking at the token earlier today, and it looked like on CoinMarketCap that most of the supply actually is in circulation.
About 70% of our total supply is being circulated and 30% is held by our foundation.
What else can I do with this MVL token at this point?
You can actually use it to redeem for the service voucher for ride hailing, but also driver side. If they hold this token, they can redeem this token as a payment for battery swapping. Battery swapping is one of our infrastructure business that we are providing in Cambodia, for example. We have an electric vehicle manufacturing business called ONiON Mobility. The electric three-wheeler equipped with a swapping battery. So whenever they swap the battery, they have to pay the fee.
They get a little discount if they do that with the token.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, a couple dollars discount that they can redeem it.
Now we're on the third business. How did we get from Singapore ride-hailing and creating a zero commission competition to Grab to other countries in ASEAN and then the e-mobility services?
After we introduced the TADA ride-hailing Singapore in 2018, the next market country that we looked at was Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand. We picked Cambodia first. There's a reason why we picked Cambodia first. I visited Cambodia back in 2018 and 19. I thought Cambodia would be a very super poor country, but the capital city of Cambodia, which is Phnom Penh, is very well developed and then lots of high rise and people are using smartphone for everywhere. They call the call and there's no taxi company. All taxi company actually bankrupt. People only using ride hailing in Cambodia, but also at the same time, number one player is not Grab in Cambodia. The local service called the Pass app. So then I saw the opportunity that we can actually penetrate in this market. But at the same time, the vehicles that people are using for the taxi service and transportation was three-wheeler imported from India. One of our strategic investor of our company is from the car parts manufacturing industry, and then they're number one tier vendor for Tesla and the Hyundai Motors. They supported us to build the electric vehicle to turn this Cambodia truck drivers into electric vehicle driver. One of the big reasons why we wanted to build an electric tuk-tuk and a vehicle is since the beginning, the design of all our blockchain ecosystem needs to have access of the vehicle movement data, like location and the vehicle condition. So to have the fundamental access of the vehicle data, we wanted to have that access by building our own vehicle. The technical entry barrier of electric three-wheeler and two-wheeler is relatively easier than four-wheeler. And also at the same time, drivers are also suffering in a certain level. So we wanted to deliver that into Cambodia.
How many of these tricycles have you running in Cambodia?
Slightly over 700 vehicles that we have delivered past 2 years.
And you're saying battery swapping, so they can ride permanently. If they need to charge, they pull out the battery and they get a new one in and are off to the races again?
Drivers who's driving a tricycle in Cambodia for a living, if they need to plug in and charge for a couple hours, that's a big opportunity cost for them. We designed this tricycle with the battery swapping, and then that infrastructure has been running very well. In Cambodia, you could assume that there is no credit history. Almost 99% of the drivers who wants to driving for the ride hailing, they need to get a loan to buy a car, because even though the price of the vehicle is only $4,000 and $3,000 used one, but still they don't have enough money to afford that. So what they do is they either go to the microfinance or a traditional banks, like commercial banks. But obviously, most of the commercial banks, they cannot provide a loan to this kind of driver because either they don't have any credit history or they may have certain, let's say, $10 or $15 or $50 default history. Because of that, they couldn't get a loan. They would end up going microfinancing with the admin fee, all necessary costs. Then they ending up paying about 25% or 30% of interest. That's how they need to get a loan. But even for microfinance, sometimes driver cannot get a loan. So in this case, we are manufacturing these tricycles, we provide them as a rental program. We call the rent to own. They rent the vehicle and they work for TADA ride-hailing platform. They make money, they pay the rental fee, and then at the end of the maturity, they can actually claim the ownership of the vehicle. And now we are connecting this vehicle financing into Japanese investors. Japanese investor can purchase the vehicle and then they can generate the interest income. This vehicle being rented out to the drivers in Cambodia and Southeast Asia, and then they pay back the return. Rather than Japanese investors put their money into the banking account and getting only 1% or less than 1% interest income, they can actually make 5 to 7 or 10% of return.
You've got some currency risk there because it's a foreign currency loan, or you hedge that?
Interestingly, Cambodia using the USD as the nominal currency, but they peg their local currency called the Khmer VL into USD.
Oh, okay. I was under the impression that the use of the domestic currency was already much more common and that they weaned themselves off a bit from the US dollar, but that doesn't sound like it's the case.
What other services TADA looking at apart from ride-hailing?
That's quite broad question. TADA is 100% focusing on the ride-hailing and mobility service. We are now covering our service in Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, but expanding to Hong Kong this year, fourth quarter. But also Korea and Japan is also next in pipeline, and including New York probably next year in US.
Described as a blockchain, but is it a dApp or is it layer one? Is it a dApp on Ethereum or a dApp on another layer one, or is it a layer one itself, maybe a fork of Ethereum?
Now we are in the dApp token. We were planning to move on to the layer one. Either we are forking Ether or other layer one. But nowadays, our idea has evolved and developed a bit further. Rather than rebuilding the infrastructure that requires huge resources, we could become one of the very sharp application for a real use case by connecting the real world business. That was actually our primary focus these days.
It's been a very big search for the last 10 years for the real mass use case. Please stand up.
Last week, I went to New York and then have several meetings with investors, but also at the same time, Coinbase and Base team, a Smart Wallet team, and also infrastructure providers of blockchain industry people. All they're saying is they never seen the ride-hailing service and mobility service that working this way. They are willing to connect to create the next level of service. Now we are preparing for crypto as a payment in Singapore. So anybody who owns USDC and USDT, and we're going to allow that as a payment. So real case, and it's developing even further with the integration of the smart wallet and wallet services.
I have one question. You mentioned that it was also difficult acquiring users since users already are used to using Uber or other services. What was the incentive or what was the strategy to acquire users from the competitors?
One thing for sure is actually we started with the drivers. What we were focusing on and delivering the right message to the driver first, and then we make them our marketer. This is more like organic virality marketing that we did. Drivers actually appreciating the concept of 0% commission and then our service, and then they became the marketer. Whenever they pick up the customer from Grab, and then they're suggesting to the users that, hey, why don't you try TADA? TADA is the platform with the 0% commission. It's also putting drivers, but also at the same time, the fare will be the cheaper for you. Those kind of approach was actually working really well. And then our match ratio from, let's say, 40% to 70% and 80%. And because of that, the people start believing that service quality, but also the ability, then that became the retention cycle. Our marketing budget is very small. Even now, our monthly budget that we are spending, it's like less than 300K per month. While Grab and Gojek, they're spending millions of dollars.
You mentioned that in Cambodia, you have introduced the electric tricycles. What do you think could be an entry barrier for bringing electric tricycle into cities like these?
Bringing tricycle to Japan is not a big problem. The biggest problem here in Japan is the regulation. Even there are many different vehicles that can join to ride hailing here in Japan, but because of regulation, drivers cannot bring the private car and providing service ride hailing. A couple months ago, Japan government allowed that the private car can join the ride hailing, but with the management of taxi company. So that's also another problem. But also at the same time, those private car service also, they force them to follow the taxi path. It's all about regulations. Tricycle may work here in Tokyo because the speed limit on the city, inside of city, is 50 kilometer per hour. By nature, our tricycle is a good maximum speed of 55 kilo. The point is not about the technicality and then cannot bring the vehicle, but it's all about regulation here in Japan. But there is always a way. That's actually the Japanese way. You can work together with the local champions, like different prefecture. They also want to run their own ride-hailing businesses. So in this case, we can bring TADA ride-hailing here in Japan and then doing the joint venture service, or we open our app and then they plug in their local taxi service and local ride-hailing service so that we can actually working together. We are preparing the working cases in Shizuoka and other prefectures this year and next year.
Let me just go back to a couple of points that we touched on maybe a little bit. So we're talking about Japanese investors financing the Cambodian tricycles. What's the mechanism to do that? If I say I'm a Japanese resident, that sounds like a great idea. I want to invest. What would I need to do?
It's simple and straightforward. You're buying a vehicle and then that vehicle being rented out to the driver in Southeast Asia. Actually, you're purchasing the vehicle. You're not purchasing the finance product. And then a driver renting the vehicle and they pay the rental fee, and then the rental fee is becoming your income. So that's the design that we set up with our lawyer here in Japan, and then without touching the regulation and the security license. Otherwise, if we packaging this up, fractionized, a piecewise product that we're selling as a security, and that's going to take forever for us to get a license. And then it doesn't make any sense for us to do this. At the same time, there is also alternative way of doing this. So we sell the vehicle, but at the same time, this rental ride itself is account receivable. Account receivable itself can be piecewise, and then it can be packaged as a separate NFT or asset so that people can trade back and forth.
Since you're collecting the data, it would be interesting if I buy this actual vehicle, I can, as an investor, trace where it's going about in Cambodia.
We are providing this vehicle data access. You purchase the vehicle, then you get to see the driver's income, how much money that they're making by a daily basis, but also the location of data and then driving distance, all this information being provided through the dashboard.
You said you don't want to become a payments company, but at the same time, you also have a wallet. What will be the role of your wallet versus everybody else's wallet?
We made a wallet called the Clutch Wallet for the saving of our own token, but also giving access of our vouchers of our TADA ride-hailing service. The past weeks that I had a meeting with those partners who wants to provide this crypto payment gateway and payment services. And those players are going to provide us to a SDK that we can actually implement their wallet. And then we can even provide a better access and a better service for users. So again, we built the wallet to help our drivers and users to keep the MVL token, but it's not meant for the payments.
They're just going to white label somebody else's.
Payment itself, we don't have to reinvent everything by ourselves. Let's say Coinbase is investing heavily for their smart wallet, which is very convenient to use. Also, Crypto.com already been doing the payment gateway with their wallet services and then payment services. So why don't we just bring them into our platform of TADA and then create one of the collective synergy together to increase the adaptation of this crypto as a service? We are a small startup, but you're doing 3 big businesses that each businesses are require the resources like level of startups, right? We didn't start everything at once. We start MVL blockchain first. To prove this mobility blockchain protocol works, we built the TADA. So then TADA is like, while we are growing TADA, we also saw the pain point and opportunity for the vehicle side. So that's why we built the electric tricycle in Cambodia. So sequentially, we made a choice to build one by one. And also every single moment that we made a choice is all about survival. To survive, to a certain moment, we made that decision to develop, but it turned out that it's really super hard to keep everything up together. But actually, once it works together as a synergetic way, then we get a better return for the drivers and users.
I mean, in hindsight, it looks like a straight line, and probably in reality, there were some bumps in the road. But at the same time, it's still pretty straight, isn't it? There didn't seem to be a massive pivot. You stuck to this area and you have evolved it and on top of each other. Or was there an actual pivot moment somewhere hidden in there?
You got it right. Actually, every single decision that we made is for its mobility. So building the mobility protocol ecosystem works. And then every single moment, again, it's all about the survival. Nowadays, we are making profit and growing further, but every single moment is about survival.
One last question on the token. When I looked at the price, there was a spike. What was the market event?
That was quite lucky moment for us. Actually, we were listed into Upbit, which is Korean exchange. And then we listed several other exchanges. 2020 and 21 was the bull run time, right? Back then, we were the only one building the real world service. And then we were featured by many medias in Korea and then Asia side. Suddenly, the altcoin bull run started. We were one of the one who got selected by the investors, and it just happened. That was a ridiculous moment. The daily trading volume, the maximum that we experienced at that time was 1 billion.
Wow.
That was a crazy moment.
We already covered the outlook and the additional markets. Let me just ask you something completely different, just taking advantage of your perspective of the Korean market, the Japanese market, Singapore market, and let's just stay there. Everybody wants to be the startup hub in Asia. How do you view, especially the comparison of Korea and Japan were somewhat similar in terms of being risk averse and heavily regulated. Who in your mind is pulling ahead in terms of really creating an environment that is favorable to startups?
That's a very hard question. Singapore itself is actually very open to startup, but the market is too small. Korea is also open for startups, but in terms of language within Korea, English is not the main language. It's also very hard to communicate with the partners and investors as an international startup. Japan side is heavy regulation. Also, the language is the problem. Hong Kong used to be a really good hub for the gateway to mainland China. But because of government sanction, it became very bad. Nowadays, I would say in Asia, among these four countries, the best choice would be Singapore. But soon enough, I think Japan could be a good choice. It's because Japanese government is also building the fund for startup ecosystem, but also a Web3 ecosystem as well. So it could be a good opportunity once the Japanese yen depreciation stops and then appreciate again.
It seems like Korea is doing many of the similar things.
In terms of core number of unicorns and in terms of amount of money that being invested into the startups, it's actually Korea is bigger than Japan. But now Japan is catching up. Also in Japan, have you heard about the new local ride-hailing startup? They've been actively raising and then investors are supporting very well on that part. So I would say if there's a players willing to change the country and the service and try a new thing, then there is a good enough liquidity in Japan existing already. So It's just only a matter of time and then a matter of decision. If the government open to these new opportunities and startups, then I think soon we can catch up.
That's ending on a very positive note. Thank you very much, Kay. This was fantastic. It's really fascinating business and so comprehensive with the 3 startups built in one that you created across different countries, and amazing story to listen to and have the privilege that you shared. Thank you very much. We're all going to follow what comes next. So best of luck, and I'll see you in Kyoto next week.
Thanks for having me. This September, we're going to be many different use cases and other mass adoption case for blockchain as a payment